Hello.
Good morning or afternoon. It's good to see you. Great to be together again.
Let's have a look where we are. Maybe you want to go from the first to the second screen to see all of us. Hello, Ashok. Good to see you.
Hi, hello.
Thanks for joining from Mumbai.
Okay.
Just the first question, short question, how's everyone doing? Are you doing fine so far? You still enjoying?
Yeah, good.
That's good. We are enjoying it. I hope that's a good sign.
It's really it's good to be together.
I don't want to go too far into this, but maybe one or two, if someone has some insight to share from the last days or day, not that I want to go too far into this, but if somebody wants to share something, maybe someone has.
I would say, and also to know that we'll have a good bit of time this morning for Q&A for any questions that you have about. So you don't need to bring them up right now and feel like this is my only opportunity, but just.
We will have more time later, but we thought maybe also to see if something wants to be shared at this very moment when we begin. If not, that's fine too. Martina, yes.
Yeah, good morning or hello. I really felt yesterday this vibrant aliveness during our group dialogue with the whole group. And I was so happy and I wanted to dance actually. But inside of me, I was dancing of joy. So. And what really helped me dive into this deep listening was the invitation to be more interested in what I don't know instead of what I think I know or what I already know. That is a beautiful invitation to step into the unknown and away from my own conditioned behavior of thinking. And it's a very subtle invitation that is very effective. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And you don't know what a good setup you created for where we want to go next. But Doreen also raised her hand. So Doreen.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Or good evening, everybody, wherever you are. I think for me, the insight is how much although we crave our individuation, which is a separate thing from operating separately and individually. So I think the more individuated we become, the more conscious we become of us within ourselves, the more consciousness we can bring to the group. But what arises for me is how much we need each other. We are social beings, as we all know. And the fact of the aliveness, and I was writing to a friend early this morning, trying to explain how the process has changed for me. So there's a sense of excitement of this morning, getting up and out of bed and getting ready and knowing that I had a date. I had an appointment with all of you, a whole lot of you. And so that was wonderful. So thank you all for being here. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that.
Thank you, Doreen. And I think you're also leading into to something that we want to go into today. So actually, let's hear from Jamila.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
So what I just wanted to share yesterday, I had these typical technical troubles had to shut everything down, go back to my emails, reset the whole thing. And I had to do this several times yesterday and the day before. And it was amazing for me how easy it was to return. It was like returning to a group who has met for meditation for years. And I'm just a few minutes late and no one cares. And it feels so at home after only these few days. And the whole thing, and especially yesterday, the time when we all shared together in this huge group, whoever wants to say something and feels like sharing something, this is so encouraging to say, yes, it does work. It will work with beginners. We will get there. We will be able to use this in our future work. It gives me a whole lot of encouragement, actually.
Great.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe one last one. Judith, you also raised your hand.
Yeah, I want to share a bit of an inquiry that is going on in myself. I'm quite lucky that I am here in New Zealand in a community, so I can have touch and bodies with me, and so the inquiry is like, we on the screen are not with our bodies together and we share our consciousness, but as this is about online aliveness, the inquiry is how much of my embodiment, how much of my felt sense of aliveness in my whole body can I bring here? Like, it's not only my alive consciousness, like, but it's also my vibrating heart and my vibrating sex. Like, it's my whole body that is here present. And yeah, so I'm in this inquiry, like, and it's feels very alive for me. So yeah.
Great.
Great. And you missed the first 2 days where we really went into
That's true. Yeah,
a lot of the foundation of what we're speaking about. But I have a feeling you'll get an answer to your question today, or at least it's not an answer, but further juice for your inquiry.
Yeah, great.
Yeah. Or just maybe one thought without going into it. Maybe we can talk later about it, to talk about what embodied consciousness is. Because the consciousness and embodiment are not necessarily separate things. And even how being spread over the globe, and in particular talking to New Zealand right now, I'm sure it does something for everyone. Just hearing there's a voice from New Zealand coming in, it brings, for me at least, the globe in a very embodied experience to my senses. It's not just figuring out you are on this other side, but there's an embodied feeling of this globe that we are talking on right now, which is a cellular experience, which is part of this enlivened experience of being together here. At least on my end, I feel it this way.
So, would you like to give us some help in opening the space together to bring our awareness to this dimension that connects us? This opening to what we don't know, that is emergent right now.
It's kind of the same exercise we asked yesterday in the morning, or start to just use also your expertise to invite us into this space that we want to share in the next hours. Whoever has a take on it, please go ahead.
Well, my first thought was inviting everybody to hum, because that would connect to Judith's wish to be more connected physically. Can we try that for 1 minute, just to hum together?
Sure.
Sure.
And after we do it without mic for half a minute, and after half a minute we turn on the mics. And if it sounds terrible, well then that's it. But maybe we can adjust. It usually works analog, so it's an experiment for me too. You gradually can start to unmute. Thank you. With a bit more exercise, we would get there.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ursula.
Thank you.
I could share something we did yesterday when we were organizing a summit on dialogue, and we were also looking for how can we get the body in, and it was with a dancer.
Mm-hmm.
And we tried out because we realized that our back is very forgotten, let's say. So we just turned to the camera with our backs and tried to see, does it make a difference if our backs are communicating and looking at each other instead of our faces? I wouldn't say it's the solution, but I liked the idea of trying to be creative and to try out things and just to see what's possible and what's working and what's not working.
Cool.
Great.
Great.
And as I think Angela said to us on the first day, that bringing the back in, and it's also part of our practice in meditation, our awareness is not just forward. In fact, most of how we learn is from a really surround sound that our bodies take in, or not just sound, but we learn in 3 or 4 dimensions at least.
So are we doing it?
Okay.
I was not sure if Michael, if this was more experiences in mentioning it, but some people seem to be inspired, so feel inspired.
I just wanted to invite you personally, but privately to do it, to try out things, not necessarily here, but we can, of course, yes.
So,
I think the humor is connecting.
The humor shouldn't be part of this.
Mhm.
No, that never works.
I think we start to take ourselves less seriously if we turn our back.
Mm.
Oh, you have no idea how seriously I took when I realized that you saw my whatever.
I could suggest something.
Yes, please.
That also we can connect by coming extremely close to the screen, so that we let ourselves see each other's eyes. So like this. Come in very close. So when you look in the lens, you let your eyes be seen, and then some other time you can look at the other faces.
Good to see your eyes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
We can make collective gazing. Great.
Thank you.
Can I suggest one more thing?
Sure.
It's called the virtual hug, which we've been doing especially with people who are alone without physical touch. So, let me unmute myself so I can use my hand. So what you do is you put your arms out to each other, like so, and find someone maybe you feel connected with. And then you take your arms around and hug. And imagine you're being hugged physically.
Great.
That's cool. So this is a digital hug hack. That's cool.
I can offer a slight addition to that, which is it's like a blow kiss, but it's a blow hug. So when we were hugging ourselves just there, and you kind of add a blow to it to send it to the person you want to send it to.
All right.
Nice. Yeah.
Thank you.
I wanted to share how the turning the back to the screen felt. My back came really warm and alive and vibrant and present. It's like it would have been my front side. It was crazy.
That shows how embodied we are here, and how body is with all of this.
Yeah. It's interesting, making the distinction between consciousness as something that is not embodied, as if it is not embodied, or mind as if it is not embodied, is the trap of Western culture. And what's interesting is that this digital technology helps us to see that very clearly. That we're not just some image that is, or just some consciousness that is some kind of vapor that in the air. It's we are consciousness. By being conscious, we are embodied at the same. It's one thing. So we wanted to speak this morning about a distinction that we feel is very helpful, and I think it's also part of what we were just engaging in. It's the distinction between liveliness and aliveness. And I would suggest that aliveness is a quality of emergence. That aliveness is the depth of our being present. And it's the place where we are profoundly connected.
And one reason why I find it helpful to make this distinction is because both are great things, aliveness and liveliness. But to our understanding, aliveness is the core of it, and liveliness can be just a form of it. And when we do the facilitation work, it needs, it helps to have a deep understanding what the core of it, which is aliveness, which is separate from the form, liveliness. Because sometimes it's easy to substitute the form with the core, and we do some liveliness things, but we miss the aliveness. And sometimes there's an aliveness and the form is not so visible because, for example, we're not moving with the body, we're not dancing, we are not whatever, but there is aliveness between us. It's just that the form of the aliveness is not as obvious like when you are engaged with dance exercises. And to not take one for the other allows us not to take the just the outside for the inside, and be aware that what really makes a difference is the aliveness. And liveliness can be helpful. Sometimes it can even be a distraction because it's missing the point. We are making movements, but they're kind of empty movements. And sometimes we don't move, but we are very moved. The art of facilitating this is to use the outer form to support the inner reality, the shared inner reality.
I think that the shared part is what is so important. Because part of the reason, we've said this before, part of the reason that online activity it can be exhausting is not that you're just sitting and you don't have a chance to move or those kinds of things, which is often what we think. It's that our connectedness in life is and in relatedness is blocked by this screen, or that's how we perceive it. That the disconnection that we often bring into the work online ends up creating situations where you just feel wiped out after a little while. And the things that to reach into this deeper dimension and create that as a foundation for the work that you're doing with people will gives a connected field in which you can do anything that you want, but it provides a foundation that in connection that allows for a deeper engagement to happen and a heartfelt engagement to happen.
And again, the foundation of this is what we tried to share the first day. It's our own awareness for this shared space of aliveness. Because to the degree that we have a capacity to sense that, and it's a subtle sensing, we are able to make the distinction. And that's what we worked in the second day, to be able to facilitate this and see different ways of facilitating. Because if we don't have this sharpened senses of what this inner dimension of the shared space is, it's quite easy, even as a facilitator, to be distracted by outer forms and take the form as a substitute for what it really is about. And then we do all kinds of things, and can be cool things, but we're missing the inner part of it, and we even do more of the surface movements without being aware of the inner movements in this. But if we are aware of the inner movements, we can use whatever kind of outer movements are right in a certain context, because probably in a business meeting you don't want to dance on screen. But if you do kind of a spiritual meeting or a yoga meeting, you're in a very different context, and different things make sense. And humming is beautiful. Not in every meeting you would suggest that, but not to take the form for what the form is about, and to be, and that's the skill, to be trained what the form points to in the inner shared experience, so that we can use the form in the right way.
And Mario has his hand up, and I'm really curious to hear what Mario wants to say, because Mario is a brilliant dancer.
So Mario, please.
Wow, that I didn't expect that one now. I just wanted to ask if it might be possible to translate that. I do understand the distinction that you made on liveliness and aliveness. I have a difficulty translating that to German because both is Lebendigkeit. What would you for liveliness? How would you translate it into German?
That's the problem with translation. Sometimes different languages make nuances other languages don't do. Usually German has more nuances. Yeah. But here it's difficult to really bring these nuances in one German word. But aliveness is more the inner dimension, and liveliness is more the form of it.
Yeah, actually, it probably comes from the distinction between corporal and live. No,
you can relate it to that. Yeah.
This is the first that I could make a distinction like that in German.
But I would suggest to stay with the English term here, because I think, I don't know how it's for you, Mario, but for me, using the English term, it has an intuitive reference, even without using German. And not, in German, I wouldn't be able how to express this without making a couple of sentences around it. Sometimes different language is more precise in a particular pointing to something, and here the English language seems to be more precise.
But the thing that I'm really curious about with you, Mario, and it doesn't have to be now, but for those of us who are doing yoga, who are doing somatic work, who are doing dance, to bring this quality of aliveness, this interconnectedness into the work that you do online, so that the dance, the yoga is imbued with this connectivity. Those are really interesting experiments that I think that we're going to be learning much more about. How do we really practice together sensing, embodied sensing together on screen? How do we create new forms of engagement and movement, mirroring each other, working with each other, but from this field of aliveness? And that, again, this field of aliveness is a field of emergent capacities, of emergent understanding, of emergent depth of collectivity. And that's that quality of emergence is life, is growth, is the new. And how can you bring that quality into the work that you're doing? So what we'd like to do is to break into small groups right now, and we're going to have about 30 minutes again to really go into this difference between aliveness and liveliness, to share your ideas of things that you would like to try online, or ways that you think that you would like to work, and look into and explore together how can this be emergent from the aliveness of the collective field? Is this something that pulls us away? How can we integrate aliveness in the different ways that we can be lively online?
or to use a different language, how we can use outer forms, whatever these outer forms may be, like singing or the background that you present or that you invite people to present, to really enhance this inner shared experience of aliveness, and to be aware how it needs a subtle awareness of what we are pointing to in the last 3 days, in order to use forms in order to come together in what really creates online aliveness, to use the term that we are using. Of course, you can use different terms, but as we call this course this way, we stay with online aliveness on our side. So this would be what we would like you to ask in. It would be groups of 6 to 7 people. And we thought half an hour is a good time to go into it. Just recheck, is this something, is it okay for you to do this as a next step? Just, yeah, cool, good.
And to, again, practice as you're doing it. Practice staying connected with this field as you're having this conversation. Everything that we give you is a practice for engaging from this space between us. So
it's also working with the space as the space is emerging between you and me. Also, it helps to, as we are now together in this course for a couple of days, we have a collective consciousness about it. It's helpful to share this consciousness, because then the consciousness gets heightened. We not often have the opportunity to be together with people who have a heightened consciousness of this. So talking together in this heightened awareness, it again helps us to have a clearer sense of what we are talking about, and also to learn from each other, because I'm sure everyone has something to contribute that is enrichment for everyone else. So it can be a very rich conversation.
Okay.
And we will be back in 30 minutes.
Great.
Thank you.
Enjoy. Okay, welcome back. Good to see you back again, popping back in. So as we did yesterday, we would like to have a collective conversation about what you spoke about in your groups. What is the distinction between aliveness and liveliness? How can you bring, or what do you need to be aware of in order to bring aliveness into the kinds of things that you do with people when you're working with them? So just want to open up that conversation and hear from you. And as we've said before, if you can, one thing that helps to really keep a conversation together is following a thread. So to add on to what someone has said, or expand on it, or work, bring in your experience in relation to what has been brought, that helps to create a wholeness in the conversation, in the dialogue.
Which is basically part of what we attempt to when we create aliveness. Let's put it to weave a lifeline of their communication. So to make people aware that it makes a difference when we're building on each other. We are creating through lines of the communication. When everyone just comes in with my own insight cut off of the communication that's happening, then we are not weaving this lifeline of the communication and making people aware, because quite often people are in their own space and not aware of the space that we're weaving together. And so everyone is just putting their bits of something in the space, disconnected from everything else. And that makes it difficult to create a living togetherness in this. But just reminding each other that we are doing something together and creating these threads that lead from building on each other from one to the other allows this energy and the information to move and to move together. So we would like to encourage also us to do this.
It also allows for something to emerge in the dialogue or emerge in the context that we're holding together. And that where something begins to happen, a momentum begins to develop that is beyond what individuals are putting in together or popping, or what points of view are coming into the conversation. When we can really work it as a whole, something opens up, and a momentum it starts to emerge that is a very powerful kind of aliveness.
But having said that, let's have a conversation all together.
It's making me laugh because what I understood, or what I understand by the difference between aliveness and aliveness is, or what aliveness can be, is something that I might very often be if I go to this like, yes, and that's happening, and whatever is coming, and like really excited and happening and expressionate and that kind of thing. And if in being that lively, if I lose connection to presence, I will also lose the connection to the aliveness of the network of the whole group.
Right. That's right. That's a, yeah.
And I'm so bubbly and being so lively right now also, but also alive, because what just came out in the group was that maybe starting by connecting to your deadness could be a way to find out what your aliveness is. Also to so that you notice when you are sliding into more dead and into less connection and into less vibrancy.
This connects very much to what we spoke about, like very interestingly that you talk about the dead in you, that people in our group shared that the moment they felt most alive in their life was when they were with someone who was about to commit suicide, so that they felt they need to be very present. They couldn't really express what they did or what it was exactly, but just this thought of being most alive and like facing death in a way.
That's good, Josie. There's one distinction I would like to bring in, because it helps a lot in, again, facilitating these spaces, that there's a difference between the aliveness in oneself and the aliveness amongst us. And it's important to be aware of the difference, because quite often we are focused on the aliveness as we experience it ourselves, and this is part of it. But that can be also a distraction to miss how maybe I'm very alive, but the space between us is not. And to be aware of the other allows us to be there for this other. And just this distinction helps a lot to be there for what is going on between all of us.
This was also a question we had in our group, or I had, these different levels of aliveness. If I feel very alive and I join a group and the aliveness level is different, how to keep my aliveness being tuned in to the group. And often it happens that I can't hold my own aliveness, and so yeah, it's like an adjusting to the aliveness level of a group. that I feel after the group more alive or less alive. And I was wondering how to maintain my own aliveness.
Yeah, Helen, I'd like to react to that because we also had a similar conversation in our group about your personal experience and in the group. And to me, what emerges is that when I am present and when I put my attention to what is right here, right now, I am alive. I feel the aliveness. And when I don't feel it, it's usually because I'm thinking about something else or I get lost in my thoughts. And then I create an experience of feeling less aliveness. I'm curious to hear what the others think.
In our group, we kind of had a group of individuals, and we shared kind of some of our own things, but we really came alive as a group when everybody took their space and their turn, and we listened and we responded to each other and followed a thread of thinking. And that's when, rather than feeling alive from me personally, the group itself started to have a coherence and something was happening between us. It was almost as if I had to get out of the way in order to experience what we were doing.
I think we also was interesting to see that there were differences of opinion and differences of expression in the group. And then when we saw, when we were trying to look at what was happening between us, there was something that was more, the ability to hold difference was much bigger. There was like the focus was on the attention and the connection rather than on the, maybe I've got this idea and somebody else got another idea and that kind of, so there was something when we brought our attention back to what's happening between all of us rather than the individual expression. There seemed to be something more collective, it was like the emphasis was on the collectiveness rather than my individual aliveness.
I'd like to follow up on this, Alison. And when I heard you speak, I thought of maybe it's if you have a context, we kind of got a task from you, Elizabeth and Thomas, to speak about aliveness and to share our experiences from our different backgrounds. And then it's easy to fall into the outcome focus. For me, I experienced it like that. Okay, so what are the techniques? And I felt I had to maybe to share something, some content. And it's more what came alive, or the possibility of aliveness was to focus on the process between the participants of the group. And maybe that could be a dilemma in different groups, because usually we're focused on some outcome to achieve, and that prevents us or me from really going into the process. Or to focus on the process seems dangerous because, oh, what about the outcome then? But the process really gets us to the outcome in the end. So that's really quite great. Astonishing.
I appreciate it, Annika, and I would call it a living dilemma, because I appreciate that you also in the end said it's great, because to really just to engage with this dilemma, because from my experience, it's an ongoing, never-ending dilemma. But to engage in it is exactly the point of emergence, because you also want to go somewhere, but you also want to be there for what is emerging right now. And this is a living contradiction, but one can live it. And that creates something that in the end is very powerful. And also to connect it with what Alison said, because I think there is also an important point that she brought in, that if we are aware of this collective awareness, it's not only that this is beautiful, it allows to hold much more friction. So something that then usually can flip into conflict can be held collective in a very creative way. So to the sense that we are awake to this collective aliveness into this field, something is possible that otherwise is not so easy because we would fragment. And it makes the process much more creative between us.
Just to add one thing, and that's what, relating to what Jen said, that I have to get out of the way in order for that to happen. And it's not that I'm gone or that I'm forgetting who I am, but I'm in service to something else.
For me, the part that needs to get out of the way is the processing mentally. I feel it much easier to experience connection and presence if I'm not doing this analyzing. So therefore, in the group that I was in, the moment that felt most coherent was when there was silence or movement or not language.
Interesting, Thomas, you said something just there about living in that sort of friction between both, and I just suddenly had an image that seemed to sort of capture that, which was, I think it was a film I saw about a peace demonstration during the Vietnam War, and some Buddhist monks were simply just sitting, and there were crowds around them. And everybody was kind of saying, oh, what are they doing? And there was a lot of liveliness. But gradually, people got drawn in. And then everybody ended up just sitting. And it was such a powerful image, that, of how when people were very deeply tuned into that space, it sort of resonated and affected and brought other people in, despite themselves almost.
I would like to share something on that just as you were speaking, it made me realize how now in the climate that we're in all together, it's almost an act of rebellion to face the fear and uncertainty and anxiety with love and connectedness. Mm-hmm. And in the group where we were experimenting with the form of aliveness and like how one could invite the group to deepen the experience of the connectedness by bringing a connected form of liveliness to it. We were experimenting with a gesture that might express our wonder or our connectedness, or a word that would extend or expand that sense of aliveness between us. But the best one really is from me to we, like just being in that me space and then leaning into the we space together. And I felt, and I think we all really felt, that this is really kind of the best way to introduce it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you.
For me, when I'm part of the meetings of Evolve and Emerge, I always start thinking or missing a little bit the private part of being together. If the private part has more room, has more space in this events, I believe it becomes more difficult to hold the we space. But I think too that human have to go this way to the through the private, and through, I'm just reading the Master of the Rings once more, and we have to go perhaps a little bit together through Mordor. Yes, I don't believe, I don't know if you understand what I mean. Not only the positive sides and the good feeling sides help us to find the we space or the truth in ourselves. We need the deep parts of life too, to find it in the we space and to begegnen, to meet us on this level too. And I believe, I don't know, but I believe it could be, there could be much more force and much more experience of we space, and to meet us there. Oh, it's a little bit difficult, the image, but in the Christian philosophy, there's Cain and Abel, and Cain murders Abel, and to find us that we are murderer too. We all are. There's truth, and there's meeting, and there's touching, there's we space. Thank you.
Thank you, Doris. And just from my perspective, we got much better in that.
Mm.
There's a reason why we are hesitant with this, because the focus of our work is very much to protect this V-space so that it can emerge and to prevent fragmentation. But of course, you're right. In the end, this only becomes fully alive when as much as multiplicity, including all our privacy, can be part of it.
Mm.
And sometimes maybe we are over hesitant with it, and also we are learning. We protect it too much. But the reason why we do it is how can we hold as much multiplicity without fragmenting the emergent V-space that we're in? So that's kind of the dance we are doing. And
I understand.
And from my experience, we got better in holding more of it and being not overprotective of the space that is emerging between us.
I understand.
But I understand, and I agree with you.
I'd like to respond to that, because I think I understand what Doris means. And I fully agree that we have to go through our personal me space and transform that somehow, so it can be more of service. It's not, as Elizabeth said before, we are not giving us up. What we give up is the unuseful parts, but we don't know what to give up if you can't distinguish. So yes, we need a process. And what I sometimes invite people in groups, and it depends on the context, is do some journaling, give some, and you're doing this by giving us the longer breaks. So it's a bit our own responsibility how we use the breaks. And I feel they're beautifully designed into this we space. And we can do errands, but we can also sit down and write, because as you invited us not to take too many notes during this event, because it will distract from sensing and processing. But some of us are a bit more intellectually built. We are all different. So if we are, it might help to digest, to do some journaling, maybe to do it before we connect. And sometimes it's good to build in more of this. Like sometimes I'm sending people out to go and be with a tree and think about what happened yesterday, but in the official space. So maybe that's a way, and maybe there are many others. Yeah. And I also feel if we invite too much of how have you and you and you and you felt this, it tends to fragment, and it's super difficult to hold that, and sometimes not useful to visit each other's inner landscapes that way. But if we transform it alone or in more intimate groups, maybe sometimes the groups here are large. I was like, what, 6 or 7? It's more difficult. So if you are in groups of 2 or 3, you have a bit more privacy, but then we are many, yeah. So it's juggling with that could allow more private evolution, I guess, what you're inviting. And just try to see what is the right measure. And we are all a little bit responsible. I mean, you have an offering and we have to see how we respond to it so we get the maximum out of it as well for our own needs to then play it back in a good way.
I'd like to respond to Ursula, if I may. Ursula, thank you for that. And what you reminded me of was a book that I picked up again yesterday after the session. And it's called, the title of the book is How to Be More Tree. How to Be More Tree. Not very good English, the way the title is, but it is a beautiful book. And each example of tree, an ash or an elm or a poplar, each has a page of its own. And there it stands, as we all stand, proudly individuated. But underneath the ground, the tree sends out those roots. And as I speak it, I'm now getting goose flesh all over my body. I can feel the tremors coming up because that is the way that it connects. And isn't that the most beautiful analogy? Because that's what we're doing exactly now. We are all being more tree. We're being more ourselves in our own unique way. But underneath it all, we are spreading our roots. And we are feeding each other, we are communicating with each other, we are offering whatever we are through the ground of this amazing net to be more tree, to be more fully tree. So that's the way that I see it.
Thank you, Doris, for the connection with the Herr der Ringe, with the Lord of the Rings. I just read it for the 5th time, and I liked very much this idea that they are going and going, although they had no hope that it will work. And then they're saying, as a good hobbit, as long as you can postpone the hopelessness for tomorrow, everything is okay. And that's something I always not experience, but that is also in a way that this gesture of not knowing also in a we group. I mean, yes, there are things which I met in groups where I say, pooh, it's hard tobacco, I would say. But I'm not alone to hold it. I think I'm always saying that all the people we need to solve the problem we have here and now are here. And that's a very important difference to many other people who are saying, yes, if this team doesn't work, then you have to get somebody else into the group. I think it's so important to say the thing we are struggling with and we want to solve, we can solve it as we are here. Every one of us is in his power and in his grief also, in his personality, in his wholeness, and we are together with it. I am sure we can make an intelligent next step. And so that's always it's relaxing for me if I know I do the start and I do the end maybe, and I look at the group and it's a special role I have, but I'm not alone with it. Even if we go to Mordor.
I'd really like to respond to that because the thread or all thoughts were following, and all the thoughts you were expressing before, if I had to give them a name, I would name it balance. Like balancing the we and the me, balancing the dark and the light sides, different things to balance. And it was, for me, the thread that were following all the persons who said something before struck me as a balance.
Thank you, Susanna.
Can I bring something?
Thank you all.
Sorry, Elizabeth, may I just say something?
Sure.
Sorry, I've been trying to say something for a while, and I need a little bit of silence before stepping in. So apologies. I had a different experience. In our group, it felt as if we went straight into a field of aliveness. Just we slipped into it. Where I was just present with the beingness and speaking from what we were noticing. And in all of there was the space for, I love The Lord of the Rings, by the way. I've read it 15 times in German and in Dutch and in English, so love it. But in there was, people would speak, tears, love, sadness. So it wasn't, here's my whole life story, but here's this one word, which is evoking exactly what's present for me right now. And I felt that that just resonated and we were all holding it. Why am I saying this? Because I think it's less about balance between I and we. What I experience is the more that field of aliveness is there, the more of me is there. There's more of me. We even said it, nothing is expected. All of me is welcome. It was such a sense of home, of belonging, of being. And so I feel that a lot of this inner work that we're talking about in order to get out of our own way, that there's ways to hold this which are more powerful, where we can hold that wound that we have, that we cover up with shame and ignore and dissociate and whatever the hell it is, to move that in that kind of a group into the realm of, and here's mine, and to look at that. That's it. So I just want to so thank the small group and all of you.
I think part of what we've been saying is that this ground of aliveness allows us to hold more dissonance, more different perspectives, but that's also true within ourselves. The biggest motivation toward or the capacity for transformation, for change, comes from a deep recognition of wholeness. Because otherwise you don't have a place that you can stand. So, and I think that the fact that we are in an existential moment together as a species, and that this moment, when brought into this deep connection, allows us to hold for each other the inherent positivity of life. And that doesn't mean that there isn't pain and that there isn't sadness, but that life is something that we want to live. And right now we're going to go to break for a half an hour. We'll come back at 5 minutes after the hour or 5 minutes after the half hour.
You can do journaling. You also can go outside and appreciate fresh air and just take care of yourself so that we can come together and continue in half an hour.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mike.
Great. Welcome back. Okay, so I wanted to briefly speak about some of the topics that we wanted to cover in these two last sessions. Basically, we've been modeling what it is that we said that we would cover. So rhythm and tempo, participatory flow, diversity and integration, from yesterday, this is all part of what it is that we've been sharing with you by putting you through it. To be aware of constantly, as we've been saying repeatedly, pointing back to the space between us, the connectivity that we experience through our presence here together, that ongoingly bringing our attention back to that keeps it alive, keeps it in consciousness. And when it's in consciousness, it's then present. And I don't mean as a mental idea, but as an actual presence. Today we wanted to talk about innovative intros, and we invited you to innovate, and we also, as you can see, that we take breaks often and lengthy breaks. We could have run this course in a face-to-face seminar. We would have done this course in 2 days. We've spread it out both because of time zones, but also so that you have a chance to be able to be fully here and also have rest from this space, because it takes a lot of attention and a lot of awareness to be here together. We're also using the different Zoom features in order to maximize participation. And that's something that you can also always do, that whenever you feel that the group is not, that there's too much silence in the group, and you want to give people a chance to engage more easily, to use the breakout rooms. All these things that we've been working with are ways for you to do what you do in an online context.
And talking about the timing, there's also one general recommendation that we ongoingly find, and I'm sure you will find much more, that there are limitations to online, but not to be kind of stuck with the limitations of online, but to see also the advantages of online. For example, when we talk about the timing, and what Elisabeth just said, that we could have done this if we would have had a physical meeting in a much shorter time. We also would have needed to do it in a much shorter time because of traveling costs, hotel costs, and all that. There's a limitation of costs when you do a conference or a meeting, because you can't just spread it over time, because the hotel costs runs and the place costs. People have, but there's a limitation to do it online, but there's always an advantage of doing it online. You can weave it in with other parts, because you don't have to travel anymore and you don't have to pay for places in that sense. So to see in the different ways where we just are in the process of finding out where online is not only holding limitations, and usually we are more aware of the limitations because we are used to the other stuff, and we are not as easily aware of the new possibilities that it brings. And the time that we created this way has a different design than you would do a physical meeting, but it also has advantages to do this time, and also to find your own ways to think creatively, to see this not only just as, oh, we have to do it online, so it's limited. Yes, there are limitations, but there are also things that you would not have been able to do otherwise, just to be aware of that.
And I would say one of the things that does, as we've been saying from the very beginning, that does become more salient, more obvious, more palpable, is the space between us. And that is an incredible benefit to being online. We do this, of course, in our programs. We do this face to face in our actual embodiment here together, our flesh to flesh meetings, but we also find that this forum brings presence alive for people in a way that is really an accelerator for that kind of deeper connection in in body-to-body, spaces. I don't know, what do we call them? We don't want to say that's real and this is not.
Offline spaces.
Offline spaces. There we go. Okay. But also your creativity. I think that the conversation that we just had about the difference between aliveness and liveliness, that this I recommend that this be an ongoing experiment for you in your work online. The things that you know in your body, in your work, from working closely with people, from being very attentive to other people, for creating spaces where people can be together in deep ways, that from that experience, try it out online. Try out these deeper ways of connecting. People are doing all kinds of things online. I'm sure many of us have probably been already invited to an online dinner, or a coffee and cake, which is very German, to have your Sunday coffee and cake together online, that with friends, a circle of friends. People are doing dancing online. There are ecstatic dance parties happening online.
And in fact, I would be curious to meet, let's say, in half a year or in 1 year or in 2 years, and just see what we all learned together in doing this. And I'm sure we will be in a very different situation, because all of us will have found out so many new things we can do this way that they will be exciting. We still don't have a clue. Mm-hmm. Just to be aware that we are, and with we, I mean the species, the human species, is in a pioneer situation to find out how we can do this. So we are just finding out together and bring this. For example, what Elisa had mentioned before, the disadvantage of the screen experience that we try to highlight again and again and again in these 4 days turns also out to be advantage, because I guess it is also your experience, as it is our experience, that after these 4 days, that we are much more aware of this subtle space between us as a reality, more than we even usually are if we do this in an offline meeting. Because the additional attention that we have to give to this in order to create it, because otherwise it falls apart, becomes something that stimulates our awareness of what this is. And our experience is something that's not only very helpful on an online meeting, it's also very helpful in any kind of human interaction, because we become aware of something that's true anyway, but because we need it so desperately here, our awareness gets skilled in a way that it wasn't skilled before.
And then that transfers back to your one-on-one, face-to-face consultations or group meetings or whatever, once we're back in offline situations. And that's a very, very powerful thing, a very powerful thing. But I think what going back to that, the importance of the conversation between aliveness and liveliness in your designing and working to create these spaces, stay aware of this difference, and of how the foundation of aliveness can support all kinds of liveliness, but not to get disconnected through lively activities that where you forget or create spaces where it's hard to stay in touch with this deeper aliveness, this deeper field, because it's that depth that will allow people to trust, to feel to feel connected, and to be able to do the kinds of work that we all do together. It will make that possible online. So we thought that now, for most of the rest of the time, that we would just want to open it for questions. Any questions that you have that are lingering, whatever they are, we're happy to take them, and then we'll come to a conclusion.
So this is an open forum, and I'm curious what we will go into.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, maybe I would like to say something. I was late this morning, and so I didn't go into the group meeting or the breakout meeting. But then I was just looking at all of you expressing yourself from the breakout meeting, and what was so very remarkable and awesome to see the pure humanity which was expressed through all people who were saying something, and yeah, it was really awesome to see this kind of beaming humanity. I enjoyed it very much. So I had not the idea of missing out on something at all this morning. What I realized with this is that the V-space, and also that the screen is no limitation for that, is the natural habitat for humanity to emerge. And that's what I find fascinating, that that in this V-space, this our humanity emerges over and over again anew. So what has been happened before will never happen again. There is always something new. And so what I notice is that in V-space, humanity comes first. So and that's what is very important to me, because I'm doing this similar kind of work, and I always have the emphasis that we have to meet as a human being first before we can do anything at all. And this way you are guaranteeing a way of working which is happening in that way. So I want to thank you very much for these 4 days. It was amazing, and I'm very impressed. Thank you.
Thank you, Samadhi.
I would really love to continue this thread, and I would love to hear you both sharing more about this. There was the same thread was resonated so strongly yesterday when Michael was sharing. It just really stayed with me so deeply. I felt that he was so bold, actually, in speaking the unspeakable, actually. And there's something about how tangible this human we space is here online with you and in this conversation that I would never have imagined being possible. And there's just such a curiosity about the capacity that we have to reflect upon this shared humanity in this space. And it was really a gift in this previous conversation that we just had now for me to really drop into how we are really in service of this by bringing the wholeness of who we are with all of our experience and love and pain and all of it, like that, to really give it all to this capacity that we have to reflect back to us how deeply human it is to realize our oneness. And I just find this is just so fascinating. I would just love to, I want to just dive into this.
As we are.
As we are.
Diving into it.
As we are, like right now. This is, we are just fascinated at this amazing capacity of human consciousness.
The reason why I say as we are is because I also want to hold back of the temptation to explain this space. Of course, we have thought a lot about it, and there's a lot we to kind of reflect on it, and in fact it's very helpful. But what we found very helpful is to hold back on the explaining part and allow and focus on the facilitating part, so that something can emerge between us, and then work with the pointing out of the shared experience that we have, so that we together can look into and investigate the experience that we are having in the very moment. Because if you explain something, it can be very interesting, but you very easily end up, even if it's fantastic, in a mental space of explanations.
Mm-hmm.
And you miss the very thing that we are talking about. So that times for that, because reflection is important. It holds also something. The mental capacity is not a bad thing. If it's done in the right way, it's a very important thing. But to kind of, and that's again, I think, something which is helpful anyway, to focus on the facilitation, the pointing out of the experience that we share, and point also out at the fact that we share it. In the moment that we point out this is not your experience, Rachel, and it's not my experience, Thomas, it's a shared experience. We point out something that's quite miraculous, because I don't know how many thousand miles away you sit.
I'm in Australia.
Yeah, that's what I'm referring to. So here we are. So first question, where is here? When we say here we are. But our shared experience is, I would say, here we are. Whatever this here means. It definitely doesn't mean the middle of Germany. It also doesn't mean Australia. So whatever. But there's experience of here. Interesting. And in this here space that we obviously share, something is emerging between us, and let's investigate what it is. And that investigation itself opens the space ongoingly.
Mm.
And that's, I think, a big part, to focus on that emergent realization that allows this space to grow.
Mm.
Nothing against explanations, and I can talk a lot about it, but it's very easy, leads to a mental space.
I know, and this is this is really the invitation, because when I said I felt it was very bold of Michael to speak of the unspeakable, it's almost like I dare not even say this. I dare not even touch it because it's so precious. And yet there's nothing more precious, you know? So yeah, how to speak of the unspeakable and not make it an explanation, but just to be able to express the depth of here-ness that we're sharing.
That's the training. That's the, and it's built on one's recognition of the preciousness and how it touches you, and the language for giving to it, that allows one to give to it, comes from that place of care and preciousness, care for the preciousness of the space.
Because I just want to highlight one other thing that I also consider being a miracle. We do speak. We are not just in silence of the unspeakable. We speak, and the difference, the way I understand it, is instead of to speak about it, to speak to it and from it.
Yeah, in service of it.
And in service of it. And there's a way where language can kind of dampen it, even kill it, if it makes something conceptual out of it. But there's something where language can do the opposite. It can enliven it by speaking it from it, to it, and in service of it. But one has to be aware of something to be able to use language that way. And one has to be very careful to use language that way and not in the other way, because language can do both.
Can I ask a question which I think is related to this part of the conversation? Is there any area in your experience that's too difficult in this context? So I've been asked if it might be possible to facilitate a group of bereaved parents, and I'm nervous. I don't know. I'm used to doing that face to face, but I'm very nervous in this context. Can you say anything about that?
I think that this space and this space online can hold all of that. And I think that there's, and I think particularly at this time, there are people who are suffering great loss. You know, there are people who are engaging and engaging with the loss of loved ones and a decimation of their communities. And we are all at an edge here. And I think that this space, but careful tending of the space, like you would do with, you know, face to face, but bringing people into this shared, the sharedness, the connection, and from that connection, speak or invite them to be with you. That's I think that's why this field, this field of presence, ends up being so useful for those of us who are doing deep work with people and looking to comfort people in these situations. That being able to evoke that connectivity and bring that to them is a healing also.
And again, Liz, I would say the key to your question is your own awareness. And your own awareness to the group that you are working with and for. To be aware what is the potential of this gathering, because certain things will be possible there and certain things won't. And your capacity to respond to what is and not what should be allows you to be there and to be in service of that. But it's only your own awareness that really allows you that in any kind of setting has a specific quality, and it's a complete and useless question to ask what should be, because that's not where we are. It's to be in service and in love for what is, and see how we can be there for that and allow something to emerge from what is. Emergence only happens from what is, never from what should. But it's our capacity to respond to this. So the question in the end lies in your own being aware of what this field is, what's the potentialities, and your capacity with all the skills that you have, I'm sure, already. To how to translate this in an online setting and see what is possible.
Because it will be a translation.
Yes.
And it doesn't mean that it will be less than. I mean, it'll be different. And there are certain things that, particularly when we are experiencing grief, you want to be able to touch, you want to be able to hold, you want to be able to be with each other physically. Yeah. But the not to try to duplicate completely what you do usually, but to be aware of the possibility and potentiality of this space, to create a whole that will be healing for people who are suffering, and use then the skills that you have within this context, which means very, very much like what Thomas is saying, built on your own awareness and your own love for the people, and also love for the beauty of being together and being aware of being together in this space.
That's really helpful. Thank you. I had even just earlier this week said that I didn't feel I could do this. And even in these last few days, I feel like I'm changing and feel like I'm opening up to the possibility. So thank you.
I would like to contribute to this question and maybe to others, and also what I'm sensing. What we had in our small group dialogue, there was one person who expressed that it was very difficult in one meeting where there even was a shared purpose. It was very hard to get connectedness and a lot of head stuff happening. And what we realized is when whoever senses that there is something not happening, that is the best person to contribute to the wholeness. And I mean, that's what I've come to learn over time. If I'm kind of frustrated or missing something, this is this concept of the wounded healer from Jung, maybe you know it. It's like if we sense something, we are the people who can give it, because it's only us, or maybe only us, who sense something missing. So maybe, Liz, whatever your fears are, and you didn't share that, but whatever your concerns are, and it's similar to what we heard, is like, I would go like, what would I need in this situation? And how would I like to be invited in so I feel well? And if we can complete that, it's usually the best we can give. So instead of looking for this whatever solution, as Tom mentioned, what is the ideal or not there, what should be, just a very personal, what would I need? And sometimes it helps me to imagine, how would I want to be welcomed in a group where I don't know anyone, or where I'm afraid, and then to act. I mean, it can be overdoing. It's not a good recipe all the time, but it's just interesting to also think it and sense it. That's what I think what I'm doing when I now have lots of stuff also I'm not used to. Just think, how would I naturally want to live through that?
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Ursula.
I would like to follow up on something Priji said, and I hope it's not a distraction, because it was very, very helpful what the conversation between you now recently. But I'm sensing, I'm, like we say in German, I'm sitting on it. Mm-hmm. And that is because I'm also very, very fascinated how this shared human experience leads to connectivity and connectedness. I feel like I know you, although I don't, and now I have the question that it can be some kind of exclusive space as well for humans. And when I speak of consciousness, then the concept or the reality is bigger. It's nature, it's all of consciousness. Mm. So my question, it's a heartfelt question, is how do we not lose all the other aspects of consciousness when diving into this online world? Mm. That's because I think at the moment it's so not only at the moment, but it's so vital that we bring these layers of consciousness together. Mm-hmm. Do you have any thoughts on this, or someone else maybe, how to integrate that into this shared experience?
I think it depends on the context that you're in, but I think that is a responsibility that we have, is to bring in our awareness of these different dimensions into this space. We have worked closely with a friend who's a shaman, who has done rituals for us with different groups that we have worked, and there's an incredible. It's been really shocking to us how powerful the experience can be. Yeah. And also how I think that there's a shift that begins to develop in engaging this way, particularly globally, in terms of our awareness of being together on Earth.
Yeah.
You know, we usually think of ourselves, it's like, I live in this village, I live in this house, this is where I am. But that there's beginning to become, and I think this is part of the spreading of this work, or our capacity to be aware and be together simultaneously across the earth, is building a layer of awareness in ourselves of the wholeness that we're a part of, that includes all of nature, that includes all the species, and what can happen with that when that's more and more awakened between us. That's something that I think we're really looking forward to finding out. But depending on your context, bringing in a water ritual, a water blessing, or a candle, or different things that represent the elements, or bringing in different aspects of nature into this context, or encouraging people to go and explore and come back, bring the experiences back. We need to weave that in too.
And also very, very directly, because in the end, it again, like maybe everything comes down to a question of consciousness. Because we haven't talked about it, and it's not appropriate in every context to talk about this. But the conversation that we're having right now is not just a human conversation. In fact, the two of us, if you're sitting in front of a window and outside of the window is a tree and the wind is blowing through a tree, in some way, this is part of our conversation with you. And now as I voice it, it's also an obvious part of the conversation.
And the wind and the tree just went like this.
Bridgie, talking from Australia, we are talking to Bridgie, but we're not just talking to Bridgie. There is also Australia coming in. The earth mass of Australia is part of this conversation. And it's not always, if you have a business meeting, it's not always appropriate to talk about this. But I'm grateful, Annika, to bring it in, because even if you don't talk about it, even if I would not have mentioned that Bridgie is bringing the landmass of Australia in this conversation, it somehow, even before I've mentioned it, it became part of our shared space, I'm sure, for every one of us. It has been the case. So the richness of the more than human world is always part of us. And the way I understand you is also that we have to consciously acknowledge that. Mm-hmm. And that is important, because part of the deficiency of our culture is to ignore it.
Mm. That's the intention, really. Mm. Thank you.
Because it's an important part, and it's not always the right thing to talk about it, but it is the right thing to talk about it.
Mm. Yes. And the tree in front of my window is also going like this now.
They're nodding to each other. They're greeting each other.
Thank you.
I think they're also human beings we tend to ignore. So, it's easy to ignore children and think this is just a grown-up business, or it's easy to ignore asylum seekers who might be inconvenient, or people with autism who might not be verbal. So I really liked the piece earlier about holding as much multiplicity as we can without fragmentation. But sometimes in these conversations, I think it's a bit too convenient just to kind of work with the nice people who are easy to work with.
Can I respond? Thank you for that. I just want to perhaps, just if I may, just give a little bit of an example of, and I suppose in a way this is the example that I want to give, is something that's happened through time. I'm involved in San rock art documentation. So this is an ancient culture, San, the beginning of life, of human life, which is thought to have come out of Africa, or the Homo sapiens. And so for many years I've been doing that. And then I was asked by a group of land artists to actually bring their culture into the sound culture. And this all happens way up in the mountains in South Africa. And so it has been a physical journey of actually honoring sacred ancient sites with all the paintings, and then bringing the way that we actually do petroglyphs. So we are placing petroglyphs, which are stone land art sculptures, just as an explanation for those who maybe don't know the term, across a number of places on the African continent. And I look at this, and I mean, that's a physical journey, which is also very cognitive, a very spiritual journey, because we have to be very particular about the sites that we find. And sometimes, and I'm sure you've all had that experience, you actually get out of, in this case, it's like heavy 4x4 jeeps and things, because otherwise we can't get into these places. And then we walk for miles. And when you tread on the earth, you are so aware that some of those sites are sacred. Things have happened there that we can feel, but we have no idea of what it actually was. And I think for me, this space is a bit like that. We don't have the knowledge. There's that we all bring a history, our own personal experience here. So we have individual history, collective history, genetic history. We each carry our own genetic history. And now we are combining all of that into a sacred space. And so we have to walk carefully, I really think. And for me, the things that are coming up is because I have as the same human frailties and tendencies. I follow a Buddhist tradition. And one of the things I'm learning and have been trying to learn for many years is not to hold on, to allow things to be and to let them go, with the knowledge that they will still be there. And I think that for me is what is happening here. Because the feeling of safety that you two have engendered, and I thank you deeply for that, this real feeling of safety that has occurred over the last few days, that has done away with much of my fear and anxiety about my individual future, the future of the planet, all of those things combined. And of course, there is a tendency, I want to hold you all. I want to bring you all here and be with me, because you have become my Linus blanket. You've become my comforter. And that is just the most wonderful thing. So how do I put myself at ease about that? So there's been this amazing bringing together. And then when it's time to say goodbye, it's time to say goodbye. But knowing that you are still there. So that is both a question, my contemplation, and my thoughts on this matter.
Thank you, Doreen. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
I have just a small remark, because you said online, and then as the opposite you say offline. And I am looking for years for another word for offline. And as you are very sensitive for language, I dare to say that here, because I think it's online is wonderful, as we experienced here, or has his opportunities and his advantages and disadvantages, but real life too. And so I try always to say online and on life. Or maybe you find another word, but I think it's so important to be aware to that that I don't want to define myself or my interactions through a machine or through a technical instrument. And so maybe you find something else on life, but I just want to make that point. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
No, thank you, Irene. In fact, you're touching into something here. Because I'm aware of what the word holds and how the word vibrates. There's a reason to use it to make a counterpoint to this virtual reality, to make us aware that online is not unreal, it's not virtual. But offline, I'm aware of what you're pointing to, and I haven't found the solution yet. So just to say, I agree with you.
I'd just like to say something in response to Doreen. Hello, Doreen, in South Africa. And I'm sure you already know what I'm going to say. But it's like, you know, we're talking about co-creating this space, but it's so important for me to keep remembering that this space already is the case. That we're not creating some kind of reminding ourselves that it already exists, and you can't fall out of it ever.
Yeah, love that.
Great.
Thank you. And also Mario rose his hand, and as we have a conversation here without raising hand, but some people feel more comfortable to raise the hand than to jump in. Just also to make spoken, it also creates some more security that if you just want to raise your hand, that's also possible, and we will make sure that also by raising hand, you come in this way. So Mario, please.
Thanks. So it seems in the last minutes we have been zooming out in a way. I had a question that is more zoomed in, probably I may do that. This capacity to hold complexity without fragmentation that we mentioned before. Just in the break, it appeared to me that this somehow also might be related to some forms of depression where complexity is like overwhelming. And I was wondering, there should be, or I sense there is a way of applying this, what we practice here, also on the personal level, on the complexity inside myself. And I was wondering about your view on that, or if you know of any also people who are working in this way.
When there's now you're going in very specific territory when you're talking about depression. What comes to my mind, and which somehow applies here, is the relationship between trauma and healing. Because trauma is always an experience of overwhelmment, of where people are overwhelmed, and healing usually is possible when the place that is traumatized can be touched by, is at the same time held by something that is not overwhelming, so that our kind of vulnerable places can be open again. And in the same way, I think to hold a space where all the difficult parts of diversity can be held, but our capacity to hold it as a whole is strong enough to not fall apart. That is the skill. And also to be careful, because we have also to see our limit, how much we can hold. To not invite an overwhelming complexity then that allows us, that not allows us, that breaks us apart then. So to be aware of what we can hold, to be daring, but also to be respectful where our limits are, and we work with that.
I think also that in creating a collective space where one has the capacity to sense into wholeness in a way that is easier than when one is on one's own, can be a context to be able to hold that kind of the inner complexity as well as the outer complexity. In this we can be with each other, or being with each other makes it easier to experience a wholeness that allows us ourselves to heal, because we within ourselves, and particularly within the psyche is always fragmented, and there's no healing from it that becomes one. There's a leap that enables us to experience and be with the wholeness. So it's if we can create a space for ourselves or with others, or where that wholeness can hold us, it's a way of being able to engage with or to release ourselves from the kind of chaos of fragmentation.
As you see, there's a lot to talk, and in these 4 days, a lot of things, like in any other program, you only can touch on it.
It's also very much an introduction.
This introduction. If you're interested, we do different online courses, but a space like this allows us to kind of also work it in what you can do in 4 days, and I think we did get somewhere.
Yeah, and I also wanted to say, to pick up something back with Chris, that we're working with people who are self-selecting to be part of this context and learn this, but each of you has roots in community, has roots in communities of people that you're working with, communities of peers, have special populations that you're working with, and we're giving you principles to be able to and a few clear insights, we hope, and ways of approaching that will allow you to bring this and find out what you can do in your different contexts. And I think that's also part of what's very exciting for us. And we focus in our work. We, as Thomas said, we do programs online. We have them that are English speaking and as well as German speaking programs. Our focus is on the development of this space, which we call the higher we. We're beginning to find it more accurate and interesting to call it the emergent we, because it's so much about the emergence of new potentials between us, and new forms of aliveness and connectivity. So if we will send you an email and give you information about the websites you can check out and find out what we're up to if you're interested. We would also like to offer an hour check-in call in 2 weeks to see how you're doing, to see if you've been able to start to introduce this in your work and questions are raised, if find out how it's going, and because once you start to do this yourselves, you're going to find out it's like, oh, wait a minute, I didn't think this through, or I forgot about that, or I'm not aware of this. But so we welcome everyone to come together in 2 weeks to. We have to check the date. I don't have the date set yet, but to share what's happened and support each other. And other than that, I think what we wanted to say again at the end of the course, why we're doing this. We're doing this because we are, as human beings, in an existential crisis, and it's only the beginning, probably. And we, in one of the responses is, well, let's all go digital, and that we want to bring our fundamental humanity alive in this space because it's so needed. And all of you are working in ways with human beings, with people that are deep, that are about the strengthening and expanding and developing our humanness, including more healing. We're all here doing work that is deep with human beings. And we want to encourage you to be able to use these online spaces for this kind of work because it is so needed now, even more than before.
One way to talk about what our intention is, we want to bridge worlds. And one world that we want to bridge with this is the tech world and the consciousness world. Because it's so needed right now. And the tech world, as it unfolded, has a lot of opportunities, but it also quite often has the coldness of the tech world because it has an instrumental relationship to all of that. And people who are very sensitive in consciousness work usually have a hesitation to step into technology, Zoom meetings, and like this. And this is, in fact, a call on you and all of us. You have a lot that needs to be brought to this world. And in a time right now where online meetings become so important out of all the obvious reasons, what you have is important to be brought into this. So part of our motivations to do this course is also to just share a lot of what you already have can be brought also in online meetings. It has to be translated. Some things work different and some things are need a certain attention, like we try to work out how holding this space is even more prevalent here than in a physical meeting. But there's so much that you have that is needed also in this emerging world of online meetings. And we just try to encourage you to go your own ways with this, because also what we are bringing, this is our, we do this now for 25 years. We started with telephone conferences, and we do this in all kind of, we have a lot of experience in this that we can share, but it's our style. You will have your own style, and you have to find your own style, and it will be different. And you should do your own style, because your own style holds your own strengths, and you have to bring not our strengths. If something of our strengths is helpful, great, but you have to bring your strengths in what you do. And we just want to encourage you to use it, and also to call on you to use it, because what you guys have is important and is needed. And if I help for you to motivate you and encourage you to bring it into this online world, then basically the mission of this course is fulfilled.
Mm. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
It's beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you
very much. Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you to everybody, to the
Thank
group.
you.
Thank you very much.
How are you guys?
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dankeschön. Dankeschön.
Big hugs for everybody.
Dankeschön. So lovely.
Goodbye. Auf Wiedersehen.
Goodbye.
Goodbye. Thank you. Danke.
Thank you and danke.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
So we'll give you the breakout groups again, so you can say goodbye to your groups if you'd like.
You can stay here. You go into the breakout groups that you had before. And, also, if you want to exchange private chats, emails or something, still as you're online, you can just, if you want to connect with someone, you can do it with a private chat, exchange emails. And if you want to do it here in the big room, stay in the big room. If you want to go back in the small room, go back in the small room. And we would like to leave that for you. And as in the last days, the big room and the small room stay open and stay as long as you want. And if you need to go right now,
that's totally fine.
It's fine. And thank you very much for being with us.
Can you still say one word about the video recordings?
Yeah, we'll, as soon as we get them downloaded, these are huge files. As soon as we get them downloaded and posted, we'll send you links to all of them.
And one request, please use them for themselves and only for yourselves. Please.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.